And how is it training versus SWAT? I don't understand those.
Yeah, and it's always a difficult delineation. In the SWAT world, and these guys are going to be able to speak because they're a part of the incident command structure of SWAT, which oftentimes get called after the fact. SWAT is generally a reactive unit unless we know of a threat that's going to be occurring, and then they obviously put together a great operations plan to insert themselves in harm's way to make sure that we're protecting life and property. One of the challenges that we do have is, although we train together and we have the same kind of curriculums and the same protocols as we respond to these things, we don't have enough time to get together and really practice on a regular basis like we'd like to. I mean, we have great collaboration in the Tri-City area. I came from the Portland area, and I've been overwhelmed with how closely these organizations work together and how in alignment they are with philosophies on how we're going to approach things and how we want to deal with, especially whether it's workplace violence, active shooter, any of those types of critical incidents. We wish we had more time that we could actually practice before we have that critical event, actually practice together, because really the success, like in any type of team concept, whether you're on a football team or a baseball team or playing hockey in a local area, the team has to be together to learn how we function together and how we're going to complement and augment each other. And it's tough with our day-to-day operations and all the needs of our communities. Trying to find that time to be able to practice together before the bad day happens is always a challenge. But it's important that we still try look for that time to be able to do that.
Are all forces of law enforcement in the Tri-Cities on the same communication system?
So I'll take that one because part of my responsibility, aside from being chief of police, is I oversee. I'm the director of the communications, the 911 center in Benton County. I'm happy to say that this is going to be in 16 is going to be our first full year where the majority of the law enforcement agencies, only excluding Franklin County Sheriff's Office and Connell, will be operating on an 800 megahertz radio system, which allows us full integration and interoperability in the event that we have one of these bad days that we have to respond. And there have been some threshold events in our area that have taken this mutual aid response to solve, where the vulnerabilities of the radio system were magnified tremendously. We are working on fixing that. And working on fixing the 911 system together to try and consolidate what we call public safety answering points into one, because we think one can serve the two-county area and get everybody on the same radio platform, and that communication, especially early in an incident, is critical to success.
Well, why is Franklin County, and there's no one here from Franklin County,
Sure.
So I can't ask them, but why are they not on it?
Yeah, a big part of it is just infrastructure, just working towards infrastructure. For years, most of the Franklin County entities were on a VHF system while Benton County was on 800 megahertz. It's just a matter of time and money to get the infrastructure updated. Happy to say that through some successful grant writing, the Franklin County entities have now purchased all of the 800 megahertz equipment they need in their cars and their portables for their deputies to be able to move down that road. So if they have those, they can switch to the frequency and be able to communicate.
Oh, okay.
But from on a day-to-day basis, we're still working towards moving away from VHF and onto 800 megahertz. But on that bad day, we all have the ability to communicate now, which a year ago today, we would have said that doesn't happen. And from a public's perspective, the question should have been asked, why is that not happening? So we're happy that through a lot of collaboration, we can make that happen today.
That's some good news. All right, well, we were going to go to a phone line, but then someone decided to hang up. So come on, people.
Make sure you call back.
Yeah, we see your, it's a red button here that we can see. So what about hospitals? Are hospitals involved in any of your training individually? Obviously, each city has a hospital.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about that. Yes, we do. We've actually gone in and worked with them, referenced an active shooter situation. We've worked with employees and staff. When we have our training, we actually have incorporated fire department in our active shooter training. So when we talk about each of the individual agencies still do their own training, we try to get together. We wish we had more time to combine. However, we all are individually doing it. We do incorporate our fire. Pasco, I know, does the same, and it's my understanding that Richland does the same as well. And they work with the hospital more on the triage, how they would set up as the patients come in. We have worked with our hospitals, though, with the staff in there to do some training to make sure that they are prepared and know what to do in the event that they do have someone come into their facilities and pose that type of a threat. So yes, we have worked very closely with our hospital over the years.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. All right, let's go ahead and add someone to our conversation today. Hi, you're on the air with us.
You know, that's interesting that you asked that, because a lot of it really is common sense. But I have that question's asked all the time, and I can tell you that one thing you can do, which really puts things in perspective, and I don't want to go through it now because we don't have the time. There was a video, in fact, an updated video, because I just watched it here about an hour ago. You can get it on YouTube, called "Run, Hide, Fight." It was made by the Houston Police Department. I think it was very well put down. But we really want you to get out of the harm's way. If you see somebody with a weapon, get out of there. You run, get out. The next thing to do would be to hide. To get it, if you're in the workspace, hide. And again, shutting out your lights, locking your door, doing that sort of thing. The last resort that you would do would be to fight. What we don't want to do is if right before, if somebody comes in there with a weapon and right before they start shooting, if the worst case scenario would be to fight. So I would really encourage people to look at that video. There's a lot of information out there, but that really puts it in perspective, especially with the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that people can look at, and it really gives them an idea, and even some bullet points of what to consider when you're doing that. And to be quite frank, I don't know that we have time that I can go over all that right now, but that would be a great resource for people to look at.
Excellent. And again, on YouTube, what do we look up, Houston?
Run, hide, fight.
Okay, run, hide, fight. All right, that's good information. We've got to take a break right here, but when we come back, one of the specific things that I wanted to talk to these three gentlemen about was how we're working with our schools and what our schools are doing here in the Tri-Cities to protect students and teachers. We're back in a moment here on Meet in the Middle.
5 seconds.
Welcome back to Meet in the Middle. Today we're talking about how well the Tri-Cities area and law enforcement in particular is prepared to handle an active shooter situation like the one that occurred yesterday in San Bernardino, California. My guests are Richland Chief of Police Chris Skinner, also Pasco Captain Ken Roske, and Kennewick Commander Scott Child. All three of you gentlemen, I really appreciate your time today. So we kind of ended that last segment wanting to move towards talking about school preparation, and each of you deal with a major and pretty big school district in the Tri-Cities. Let's start with Pasco, and Ken, I want you to tell me how well you feel Pasco schools are prepared and how do they work with you?
They work very well. We've spent the last 5 or 6 years working very closely with them on how we'll respond to not only an active shooter, but other bad day events that can occur in the school district, and how we can partner with them and make sure that they're part of our planning and our command post. Another piece in our city that we can't leave out is also the college. Columbia Basin College it has a huge student enrollment, and we work as closely with them as we do with the Pasco School District, and have a great partnership with both of them. And we have exercises and plans where we use each other's facilities. We use school district facilities during our training. We use Columbia Basin College. We'll actually participate in presentations for training students at the college, for example. Obviously, there's adults in that system, so they're a little more prepared for maybe running than you would have in the school district. So we spend a lot of time, and we work very closely with both of those entities. Mm-hmm. And I think both of them are very well prepared for a bad day.
No. Scott, what about you in Kennewick?
Well, we too are very, very much involved with our school district. And I think to start this out, it goes back a number of years, but their risk management team got with us when we started collaborating plans and putting things together. We have now, for a number of years, worked on what's the best way to prepare ourselves. And again, for that bad day event or that active shooter, if you will. And one thing that we've implemented is one of our training strategies has been, number one, we do some training, some collaborating with the school teachers themselves. We do, of course, have our school resource officers in there, but they're in the high schools. But one thing that we've done is we have incorporated, we bring the patrol officers, and when I'm talking about us, I know Richland is doing a lot of the same thing with the same risk management group that we are. So some of this is going to dovetail over to what Richland is doing, but each month we randomly bring officers into a school, and we look at their lockdown procedures. We have a face-to-face with them. The officers, the advantage for us is we get into these schools and we can see the layout of the schools.
Oh, yeah.
And see how things are, and see how the classes are. It's real important to us to know where common areas are, where the gymnasium is, where the cafeterias are. And it really gives us an opportunity to have a face-to-face, because to be quite frank with you, if something does happen, that 3 to 5 minutes with the officers respond, the school needs to manage the situation. And then, of course, when the officers get there, we'll collaboratively work together to resolve the problem. Another huge thing, and it's a big accomplishment for us, which is really edge-cutting, is the school district has allowed our officers to have access cards to schools during lockdowns. So when the schools do go on lockdowns now, our police officers can get into the school, whereas before we didn't have that capability. So we continue to work very closely with them. I think it's an ongoing partnership. It's very passionate to me. I'm personally involved in it. But it's very important that we bring the two together. And again, we're trying to do the best that we can to prepare ourselves, at least talking about it, being prepared, looking at understanding people need to be vigilant, to watch for signs. And as Commander Roske said, there's situations that we want the kids to be locked down if we have an external problem. Many times it's could be a search warrant going down in the street, or the police just had a police chase and something going on. So we want to protect those kids and keep them in there. So we have a really good working relationship. I can honestly say that a lot of the principals actually have my personal cell phone number, especially the school administration, and it's not uncommon for us to collaborate on at a number of different levels. So I'm very proud of the relationship we have with the school district, and I only see it getting stronger as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good news. In Richland, Chief, are schools locked all the time? I don't even know that anymore.
Yeah, there's really and I'm really proud of the Richland School District, because when I got here, one of the first things that we engaged in is a dialogue about school safety from especially the public school level, and I was really impressed to the level that the risk manager went with the school district to make sure that those protocols were in place with regards to what external doors are locked all the time, the type of visitor access that you have, and then probably more importantly, the comprehensive nature of the drills that happen throughout the year. Because I can't overemphasize this enough. The successful outcome, if you want to use the word success in these tragedies, the successful outcome is predicated on school preparedness. And I'm talking about all hazard preparedness, not just active shooter. We're talking earthquakes and fires and all of the critical incidents that could happen. But those schools are really the first place that we need to look to being prepared to deal with this, because and if not all of these active shooter scenarios or these workplace violence scenarios, law enforcement isn't the one that ends the scenario. We're not the ones that are getting there fast enough to prevent loss of life. Loss of life is happening, and usually when the assailant is pressured by law enforcement or confronted by an authority figure, in 99% of the cases they take their own lives, and it ends the situation. So having the school prepared is really important for us, and having us understand what preparations have taken place as we arrive, and what type of condition the school is going to be in when we arrive, so that we can formulate our tactics around that, is critical. But those schools got to work really hard and very diligent and be committed to building a culture of safety, and with those kids understanding what it is they're supposed to do, and staff what it is they're supposed to do under a certain situation.
Mm-hmm. What is our response times here in the Tri-Cities? Are each of those different in each of the cities?
I think it's safe to say, I mean, it's hard to nail down some exact times that will be there, but we kind of go under the rule when we work with the school district of anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes we have law enforcement on scene in all of our schools. And you got to remember, like we talked about earlier in the program, we have mutual aid agreements, and so if we do have that major situation, we're going to have a lot of law enforcement resources there within a very short period of time.
And here's the reality of it, is because we are on a shared platform, communications platform, when that call goes out, we as law enforcement, right, wrong, or indifferent, depending on who you talk to, we self-dispatch. We are going. We don't ask for permission, we go. And as a chief, my expectation of my troops is that if they hear an all-call from Pasco or an all-call from Kennewick, Benton County, it doesn't matter where it is, they're going. Now, do we have our own responsibilities in town? Absolutely. So we're mindful of that. But we're not going to spend the time to make sure that we ask for permission before we start heading that way. And I think these gentlemen would tell you the same thing. Mm-hmm. If I had an issue in Richland, I know they're on their way over the bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. the patch on the sleeve or the marking on the car in those worst day events is not going to matter. It's going to be the closest officers that can get there to work together to resolve the problem. And it's one of the reasons that we made sure that as much of our training platforms are the same across the board. So it doesn't matter which patch is there first. It's about public safety and ensuring our citizens are safe. They don't care who's there first.
Mm-hmm. Let's add this caller to our conversation today. Hi, you're on the air with us.
I think you brought up a really good point here, and that is that one thing we teach the teachers is you've got to go in there. There's no one solid answer. You know, you got a guy shooting people. Well, the only thing that you can really do at that point is limit the exposure. And that's really what we try to get the teachers to do is, if you have a situation, what are they trying to do? An active type shooter is trying to take as many lives as you possibly can in the shortest amount of time. As the chief said, many times it ends in suicide once law enforcement or authoritative figure gets there. So we mitigate as much as we can. We try to save lives. There's little, if you're unarmed and they're in the playground and there's someone that is shooting people, it's very difficult. But what you don't want to do is you don't want kids from inside running into it. So that's what we do is we talk. And I think the best thing that we can do prepared is to talk through these scenarios. There's not one canned answer for anything. To be quite frank with you, you have to use a lot of common sense. And that is protecting the kids and making sure they're not in harm's way to begin with and getting as many kids out of there in the event it starts as possible. So what we're trying to do is save as many lives as we possibly can. And that's how we train the teachers. And I really think that's the best thing we can do.
One thing I might point out, though, and it's easy, and I think Commander Child would agree with me, it's easy for us to throw the common sense card out there, but we're built to deal with this kind of crisis. We've trained this 26 years, more than that with Captain Roske. The environment that we're in was built to deal with crisis and was built to deal with what the body goes through when confronted with this kind of threat. We understand that kids and educators are not built for that. And sometimes that common sense is really hard to find when you're just thinking about saving lives. And so what we try to do is, and again, it goes back to trying to do some stress inoculation with the school districts, tabletops, exercises, drills, build in the muscle memory. Yeah, build in the muscle memory so that when you're freaking out because something's going on in your school, you automatically fall back to your training and you put yourself in a safe environment.
And that's one reason why
pressure on educators.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
And think about the recent conversations that we deal with, and I have it all the time, is should educators be armed? I mean, we have that conversation all the time. Should we start putting guns in the hands of our teachers? And we can get into a huge philosophical debate about whether that is a good or bad thing. But who in their right mind 20 years ago when they got into education ever thought we'd have this conversation?
Right. So let's talk a little bit about equipment. Well, you know what? We got to take a break here, but I want to come back and talk about. We have seen equipment here in the Tri-Cities used in some other situations like SWAT. We saw it used yesterday, that's for sure, in San Bernardino, which really I think was quite educational for the rest of the country. Let's talk about what kind of resources we have here, at least what you're willing to tell us about. We're back in a moment here on Meet in the Middle. Welcome back to Meet in the Middle. I'm Christine Brown. Our topic today is how well are we prepared here in the Tri-Cities area to handle an active shooter situation. We have a couple of callers already, so let's go ahead and add this person to our conversation right off the bat here. How you doing today? Good.
So that is a great point. And I think what I would say to that is that one of our epic failures, not only as a society, but also oftentimes in law enforcement, is our fail to communicate with each other, fail to speak up when we should have spoken up. I mean, we can go back to 9/11 and recognize that hijackers were in our country 3 weeks before they hijacked planes, and the CIA didn't tell the FBI. And so you can fast forward and say, what would have happened if we would have had better communication amongst our law enforcement professionals? It's the same thing, whether it's cybersecurity for your kids and the nuance of knowing what your kids are doing online and the vulnerabilities there. This is the same conversation, is being aware of what's going on and being willing to speak up when you see something, whether it's behaviors or actions that are contrary to what maybe the kid exhibited, or speaking up about issues that are going on in the family. Oftentimes these are family issues that get brought to the workplace with regards to violence. We just are very private. We're just very private people, and sometimes we don't feel like it's our place to speak up. And at some point, we just have to say, you know what, it's worth speaking up. It may be nothing, but that piece of intelligence is so important to us to help us be able to respond. And I just hate to think of how much intelligence is lost because people just don't think to speak up or don't think to have the conversations.
So what's your recommendation, that people literally call the police department and say, talk about something that they observed with their neighbors or whatever the situation is?
I would say that we are the clearinghouse for that kind of behavior. Yeah. I mean, it's like this nuance with human trafficking and sex trafficking. People are seeing it going around. We're just now getting to a place where people are calling saying, and this is the way this goes, is I'm not sure it means anything, but this is what I saw.
Yeah.
And let us take it from there. If it's nothing, then fantastic, it's nothing. But if it is something, we have the resources to be able to follow it up and see. And it's maybe one piece of a 1,000-piece puzzle that we need that gives us better intelligence to maybe prevent one of these types of attacks.
It is the sad situation that after it's all over, we are often hearing
all
about
the time, right?
The neighbors noticed something, mm-hmm. or a family member noticed something, but it wasn't said.
Yeah.
And do we have armored vehicles here? Can you tell me how many?
Yes, we do. First, I'll just touch briefly on a regional response. We have our SWAT team, which is a regional team. It's involving with Richland Police Department, Pasco, Kennewick, Benton County. We all contribute to it as well, which gives us a better leverage for some grant money. We do have armored vehicles. I don't want to get in a whole lot to them, but the whole idea behind armored vehicles, as you saw yesterday, is it gives law enforcement an opportunity to get right up into the gunfire to resolve issues. I know that when we purchased our armored vehicle, our newest armored vehicle, a few years ago, I said that this vehicle is definitely going to save a life, a human life in its service life, and it already has done that. The situation we had over in Pasco yesterday. So it gives us an opportunity to get in there. Again, we're in the business of saving lives, being committed to the safety, and that armored vehicle gives us an opportunity to get up there, even under fire, and rescue people or to resolve the problem. So yes, we do have them. We also understand the public perception of those things, and we try to we use them definitely when we need them.
Does everybody have one? Or it's used collectively?
Well, yes. Yeah,
okay.
We have a regional approach to that, so it's used collectively. But everybody has access to armored vehicles.
But that's just one piece of the equipment, yes, that we have.
Yeah.
We outfit our officers as well as SWAT team members. I know in Pasco, even our paramedics are outfitted with helmets and vests, so we can attach them during an active shooter or a not safe situation to actually save lives. So it goes much further than just a piece, right, of armor.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have all talked about, we've talked about equipment, you've sung the praises basically of collaboration, which I think is good news for people here in the Tri-Cities to hear. But what do you think at this stage is missing, and what could we do better right now in the Tri-Cities?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think one of the frustrating things for all of us in law enforcement is this notion that we are deeply entrusted by each one of our communities to keep them safe. And there are certain situations and scenarios that can arise that, regardless of how hard we train or how hard we work, short of being in the right place at the right time, that one of these incidents could happen to any one of us.
Mhm.
And I think that that's frustrating. What do we do about it, or what gaps are missing? I think we bit off a big chunk of it with the communications platform. That's a huge win for local law enforcement and these communities to continue to strive to be on a single communications platform and and have a single public safety answering point for us to field and respond to 911 calls. I think that is paramount to our success, being able to do that. I think the other piece would be is just the continued dedicated training time to function together and just become familiar with each other as a comprehensive team and approach to that. And then from my perspective, thirdly, is having a public or a community that's willing to take the responsibility to come alongside of us and be our eyes and ears. We talk about that all the time. You know, it's easy to be our eyes and ears out there when somebody's car prowling, the neighbor's car. This one's a little bit different, as you pointed out. This one's a little bit different. This one takes a little bit of personal courage to step out and say something, even when you're not quite sure what you're saying is valid or significant. That's a tough one, and that's what I mean by kind of coming alongside of us and helping us build the intelligence that we need to combat this.
Because I think people want to help, but sometimes I think it's the I'm not sure. What if I'm wrong? You know, because this is being discussed on platforms all over the country today as well. People, you know, we find out after the fact that the neighbors saw very suspicious stuff, but do I want to say something? Because if I'm not right, oh boy, I'm going to open a can of worms.
It goes back to just the basic concept of a block watch program. Nosy neighbors help us catch a lot of bad guys, and
Wow, yeah.
it really is. And it's as the chief was mentioning, it's taking that a step further, and everybody being a little bit more vigilant and willing to step out and have some ownership in their communities and helping us help them. We can't be everywhere. We want to be, but we can't. So we need you to have that personal courage to step out there and let us know. Each of us in each of these jurisdictions, our full service police departments, you call us, we're coming. Don't be afraid to call, because we're going to prioritize that. If there's something more important going on, we're going to get there. I hear that all the time from the public. Well, gosh, you guys are busy. I didn't want to bother you. Well, why don't you let us decide that? We have priority systems. We have call takers that are very good at fielding those things and making sure they get into the queue and they get dispatched to our officers on an availability standpoint. So I just always encourage people to not hold back and let our radio operators and our 911 operators decipher those calls for us and get those calls in the queue so we can get out there. Don't worry about that we're busy or not.
Well, people can always make anonymous
Sure.
interactions with the police as well. All right, let's add this caller to our conversation. No, we won't.
Well,
Okay.
give us a call back.
So have big employers contacted you? I know we've talked a lot about schools. Obviously, we have a great affinity to children and everything, but we also have large employers. And have they contacted you about what they should be doing? Should they be contacting you? Can you offer advice to them?
Shopping centers too.
Yeah, what?
So, you know, speaking from the Richland perspective, you know, the big elephant in Richland is PNNL. I mean, we have a huge campus of, anytime you have a campus that has that many thousands of people that are responding, it's like a mini city with all the issues that many cities have, and we work really, really closely with them on workplace violence. We'll get phone calls from them when they have difficult terminations or some concerns about employees. They'll call us up and we'll do some escorting and be on standby. And so I think all of our jurisdictions have been contacted by big employers saying, you know, we want to be engaged. The piece that we have in Richland is some of the requirements set by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission about response times and the type of ops plans we have to respond to some of those sensitive areas. And so we're fully engaged with all of those employers and all of those initiatives, making sure that we're meeting those needs.
Mm-hmm.
And from the Kennewick perspective, I would agree with what the chief says. We're heavy on retail, obviously. That's what a lot of our bread and butter is in the city of Kennewick. And yes, we have worked with a lot of big businesses. I don't want to mention them, but yes, we've been invited in on a number of occasions to come in to A, do training, to B, talk, and open up that dialogue. So yes, we're very engaged in the business community as well. And again, I think it falls back to the topic prior to this, just like with your son. The key here is vigilance. That's really what this boils down to. What can we do as a society? We're talking about, we have a lot of systems in here But what is it? It's that person that saw that thing, that suspicious thing like your son said in the theater. People really need to pay attention to their surroundings, and that's what I hope people get from our conversation here today.
Oh, good. We're going to take a break here. I have got one other question that I want to ask the three of you when we come back, and that is, what do you personally think about when you hear of one of these tragic situations in our country? We're back in a moment here on Meet in the Middle. My guests today have been Commander Scott Child, Captain Ken Roske, and Chief Chris Skinner, representing all three of the big cities here in the Tri-Cities. Gentlemen, I want to know what you think about personally. Like, for example, yesterday when you first learned about the situation happening in San Bernardino, what goes into your head?
Anger. I think when we look at this, obviously you're just like everybody else, you're in a state of shock. It's how could this happen in our society, and it's a tragedy, and of course our hearts go out for the families and everybody involved, including everybody. I mean, it's a tragedy. To me, I try to channel that anger that I feel into preparing ourselves for the future. I have a special passion for the most vulnerable, and so every time I have a renewed sense of what can we do, what little thing can we do to help prevent this. So I try to channel that into better preparing myself and the things that I have control over to deal with such a situation.
Mm-hmm. Anger and making it work for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think when those things hit the news and we all resonate with the anger, the sadness with those communities, what those people are going through, and then you start doing a self-assessment check of our independent agencies and our jurisdictions. Have we really done everything? Is there anything else we can do to make sure our jurisdiction, make sure this community is as safe as it can be? And you start running through those checklists and making sure we're ready. Yes, we're ready. What else can we be doing? And every time one of those happens, those are the things that go through. I know it goes through these guys' heads too. Have we done it all? What else is out there for us to do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it doesn't shock me that these two are, from a tactical perspective, they have a tendency to go those places and are very good at problem solving from a response perspective, how we're going to do that, and that's what makes us as chiefs successful, is because we have command staff like this that are paying attention, quite frankly, to include my captain, Mike Cobb, that's one of their colleagues. For me, I go a little bit of a different place. I think about what systems has failed us. I constantly look at the broken mental health system around this country and wonder how many of these acts of violence could be prevented if we would have had adequate mental health for certain people. I'm not saying in this particular case that's what's going on, because we don't know yet, but I think we can point to a lot of different situations and shootings even locally where mental health issues were at the core of some of the bad decision making, and it's painful to watch us continue to kind of chase our tails and try to figure out what we're going to do about this societal violence without addressing our mental health issues and making that a priority. And so that's what I think about. The other things I think about is the ongoing conversation about gun rights and legislation around gun laws and our president calling for greater gun controls and whether that's the right or wrong approach. And so I spend a lot of time as a chief thinking about being prepared to answer a lot of those questions, because I don't get a lot of questions about response stuff. I get more questions about philosophically, where do you land on this particular issue, and so I have a tendency to go there. But I think our mental health system really needs some attention if we're going to try and unwind some of the violence that we're seeing.
And I think that would tie into perhaps where a family member, a relative, well, he was acting or we knew he had some problems, but we didn't know it was that bad,
Right.
Keeping your eyes open, encouraging the person to get some help or something.
Sure.
I think there's kind of a tie in there, because a lot of times when things like this happen, and then they talk to family members later, we had no idea.
Right.
Well, he was always kind of different, or, he'd been really this way or that way, and then...
Yeah.
The mental health thing is very complicated.
Oh, sure.
It's very difficult. It's not like we could just create this, let's build a building and make everybody go there and make, Yeah, how do we provide a service to people, and what is that service that changes somebody's mind about what's going on in their life? I don't know. But I agree with you. Wow, we need to be spending, if we could spend the amount of time that we discuss gun issues, if we could spend that time on mental health issues, wow,
Yeah.
we would make a lot bigger difference, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you, and you're right, it is very complicated. There's no one-size-fits-all mentality
Yeah.
or solution to that problem, but at some point we have to do a good self-evaluation and assessment of what services we're providing people and how we get people, what the input looks like to get people those services.
I want to thank all three of you. I really appreciate your time today.
Very much.
And I think we're much more informed here in the Tri-Cities about what you are doing for us and what we can do for our own community. Thank you. All
Thank
three
you.
of
Thank you.
Yeah. We're back in a moment just to wrap up. Stay with us.